Hello and welcome to ranking every single boxing match on my channel. So, without further ado, this might be a long video, so let's get into it. First off, we'll just start from the top. Our most recent match was me versus Oliver, the second match. This I would put in A tier. Wasn't very technical from Oliver. He was just kind of swinging for the fences. I think he might have broke my nose though. My nose was pretty bloody, so it worked out for him because for some reason, as you notice in these fights, round one I can't. Round one you always feel out your opponent, so I'm trying to feel out my opponent. I have my hands down, and then I just get rocked with a bunch of punches. This being one of the best examples of it. Um, it was only 2 rounds because he gassed out in the second round. I just had to really kind of survive. But it was still a good brawl. Pretty entertaining to watch. Our first fight, I'll put in B tier. Same thing. His punches didn't land as hard as they did. He had the same kind of style, but in the first fight, I was a little bit better at keeping my hands up. So he also gassed out in round 3, I believe, but it just wasn't as entertaining of a fight because I didn't get rocked and my nose wasn't bleeding everywhere. Then we have me versus Joseph. Um, I put in B tier, kind of entertaining. He kind of had the same technique as Oliver, except I saw his punches coming from a mile away. So he was just really doing this overhand right hook ducking style. But Oliver was a little bit better with it than he was. Or maybe I was just better on this night. I don't know. But I saw it coming every time. He hit me with it, I think, one time. But he was just a little too slow because he threw that overhand. Then he just stayed there. So then I was just able to hit him with uppercuts. Only 1 round because he gave up in round 1. So that's why it's a B tier. Still pretty entertaining, though. Then we have, I believe, if we're doing it in order, this is Luke versus Sage. I put it in C tier. I think it's a 3 round fight. Pretty funny. Luke keeps getting his bandana covered with his eyes. I think that's how you say that. He was basically fighting blind. Sage was just kind of throwing a couple jabs and clinching. It wasn't that entertaining. You just really felt bad for Luke because he was just. I was like, come on, Luke, take your bandana off. And he just kept walking forward and getting punched. So his nose was bleeding a lot. So kind of a C tier fight. Then we have me versus Sage. I'll put it in B tier. I thought it was a good fight. If Sage performed a little bit better, he had some hard punches, to be fair. He wasn't that technically gifted. Um, at least it looked, for me, it was one of my most impressive performances. My head movement was on point this fight, which is really surprising because my head movement is really bad. But this fight, my head movement was really good. I believe it lasted 2 rounds because he didn't want to go a third round, so I just won by technical knockout. Um, he punched pretty hard though. I just had good head movement. My feet were slick. Um, a pretty entertaining fight, especially if you like technical boxing. Then we have Luke versus Julius. I'll put it in B tier. Julius is kind of like an Oliver. He just would put his head down and throw an overhand right and get Luke with it, and Luke's nose was bleeding everywhere. It's kind of 3 rounds of Luke getting his ass kicked. Except for in round 3, with like 30 seconds left, Luke actually started hitting punches. So kind of more of a sad fight to watch, a little bit more entertaining than the Sage fight because Julius just was throwing a lot more than Sage was, at least more accurately. So a little bit more entertaining. Then we have me versus Luke. I'll put it in A tier. It was 43 seconds into the first round. This fight was just nothing but punches. Luke and I just right from the bell just started throwing hammers. That's why I knocked him out in 43 seconds. So it's a fun little easy fight. Luke actually threw a lot more punches that landed in all of these fights anyway that he had. So it was pretty good. Luke can punch pretty well, so he didn't rock me like Oliver did, but I definitely felt those punches until obviously I knocked him out. So not I wasn't very technical in this fight. Most fights I try to be more technical. That's why I'm 19-0. But this fight was fun because we just kind of let it all hang out. Then we have my dad versus Bryson. uh, I'm gonna put it in D tier. Unfortunately, our first D tier fight, just because. I mean, for entertainment, uh, I'd probably put it in C tier, but it just wasn't a good fight. Bryson threw maybe one or two jabs that landed. My dad fell over in the first 2 seconds, the first punch that he threw. Then he fell over in the first 40 seconds, and then he threw his gloves off and started throwing a fit. So, not a very good match. Kind of funny, though. Then we have Mark versus Gary. This is our first S tier match, actually. Um, if it lets me do it. There we go. Our first S tier match. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So this was a really good match. It was only a minute and 34 seconds long, but it was just, Mark was just a different being this day. He just had Gary on the ropes. He was just dodging punches. He would duck down, throw an overhand, hit Gary flush in the face. Then Gary would come back with a jab that would rock Mark. Both would land at the same time. Gary's glove came off. He was trying to punch him without the glove on. It was it was pretty entertaining. Mark was really technically gifted in this fight. Gary, even though he wasn't as technical, he was punching super hard, which, as you can see in other Gary fights, he doesn't hit with the same velocity he did in this fight. But he was trying to take Mark's head off in this fight. So it was only a minute 34 seconds, but it was a very entertaining fight. Our first S tier. So then we have me versus Cole. I'm going to put it in A tier. It's pretty close to S tier, but it was 3 rounds. I lost the first round, which is common for me. Second round was up for debate. I might have lost that one too, but that just made the story 100 times better because in round 3, with 10 seconds left, I got the knockdown in a fight that I thought the whole time was going to be my first loss. Actually, somehow was a win, and I got super lucky that I just let it all hang out. So if you like a good story, it's probably A tier. Then me versus Richard. I'll put it in another A tier fight. It's 26 minutes long because it's 12 rounds. So I think we've only had two 12-round fights. This is one of them. I don't want to say it's boring, but obviously 12-round fights could be boring. It was really just the first couple of rounds were really good. The first couple of rounds I lost because he trained in a gym. He's actually like an amateur boxer, so yeah, I kind of got beat up for a couple rounds. Then he started gassing out, which I'm surprised of, or which I'm surprised about because he's 110 pounds. But he gassed out in like round 8 or something. So then the rest of the rounds were just me chasing him around. So that's why it's not an S tier fight. The first couple rounds are A tier, and then the rest of it is just kind of me running after him. Then we have me versus Gary. Um, I'll put it in B tier. Just kind of your average fight. Gary really wasn't trying to hurt me, which makes sense. Most of these fights you can tell are kind of more like sparring matches. Like there's a couple on here which you're throwing for the fences, like me versus Oliver, me versus Luke, Mark versus Gary, Julius versus Luke. They're just trying to take their heads off. I mean, Luke not wasn't trying to take Julius's head off, but vice versa. All the other ones, obviously, I wasn't. You can tell I wasn't trying to take Oliver's head off, but he definitely was trying to take my head off. But this fight was more of like a sparring match. Gary was just kind of throwing a couple jabs, and then I wasn't really trying to hurt him, so I was just dodging punches. Then I got a nice solar plex shot, I believe, or a nice stomach punch, at least at the end. And then Gary just fell over. Still a pretty fun match. Me versus Harris. Also, only one round. I got a nice left hook at the very end, which put him down. So I'll put it in B tier. Kind of entertaining. Harris also stayed with me for a few minutes, so that was nice. Then we have Gary versus Harris. Yeah, it was too nice. It was really just like they're walking back and forth, occasionally throwing a punch every 30 seconds. You can tell that they just really didn't want to punch each other, so it was just kind of awkward for 10 minutes. But you know, I'd put it in C tier. Actually, no, I'd put it in D tier. It was a little too boring, unfortunately. When you're watching a boxing match, you want it to just be two dudes swinging at each other. So when they're just kind of walking around, it's not really a fun match to watch. Then we have Archer versus Dylan 2. Definitely didn't live up to the hype. Another 12 round fight, but it was really just I saw Archer's overhand right coming from a mile away every single round. So, but I also wasn't trying to hurt him, which is my biggest flaw in most of these matches. Is that I'm too nice. So it was really just me throwing a couple jabs, stepping back, dodging his overhand, rinse and repeat. I'm going to put it in C tier just because there's that one moment where I dodged his overhand right and then ducked down and then got up and then somehow dodged a flurry of punches. And we had nice intros and things like that too, so it was kind of fun. Then we have Greg versus Keyshawn. I'm going to put it in A tier. It was a pretty funny match, a pretty fun match. They were throwing for a while until Greg hit Keyshawn with an overhand left because Greg is left-handed, which rocked Keyshawn. Then Keyshawn I think he gave up after that because obviously he got rocked with a left hand. So it was a pretty fun match. Keyshawn was holding his own for a while too. Then we have Bryson versus Keyshawn. Kind of in the same boat. They at first, you can tell Bryson really didn't want to hurt Keyshawn. Keyshawn, on the other hand, didn't care. Keyshawn was just going out there swinging. So then he hit Bryson with a pretty hard jab. Bryson's nose started bleeding. Bryson got pissed and just started hammer fisting, basically, even though it's not the UFC. I'm gonna move it down to B tier actually, just because it both aren't great technical boxers. I mean, Keyshawn did better, but it was just like 6 minutes, and you kind of felt bad for Bryson. Keyshawn kind of dominated a little bit. Then we have David versus me. I'm gonna put it in D tier. This was a terrible match. I don't know what I was super afraid this day for some reason. Not because I thought David was gonna be a great boxer, because it was actually the opposite. I don't know why I was just afraid to throw. I literally would, duck down, throw a jab, wait, duck down, throw a jab. David had good defense, but it was literally just because he pretty much knew my next move. I would go for a body shot, he'd block it, then I'd go for the head, then he'd block it. So I was basically just punching his gloves the whole time, which is not very entertaining. It was basically just David blocking my punches and not punching back. And then we have me versus Bryson. I'm going to put it in C tier. It was just kind of like a sparring match for me, at least. I wasn't trying to hurt him at all, so I was just kind of going gently for 3 rounds. He got me with a couple hammer fists, kind of because I let him, but you know, it is what it is. I was just kind of playing around out there, which doesn't make for a very entertaining match, but some of these is just, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. So then we have me versus Keyshawn. this one was a little bit different because Keyshawn used to bully me in elementary school, so I had some reasons that I had to do Keyshawn like I did in this video. 3 rounds, Keyshawn held his own, but I went a little bit harder on this one. I'll put it in B tier. It was mostly just me for 3 rounds, just kind of dominating. This is actually the first round that I actually won in I think all of these matches. That's a little bit over exaggerated, but yeah, I just kind of started swinging. I thought Keyshawn would do better, actually. That's why I was kind of surprised. I was like, all right, I'm just going to go out and just swing. That's what I did. And then Keyshawn didn't really swing. I was like, oh, I kind of feel bad now, so I slowed it down. But the first couple of rounds, I was just kind of beating him up. Then we have me versus Jack. I'll put it in B tier. Jack wasn't too technically gifted. He got me with a couple jabs, but it was mostly just me jabbing his head off the whole time. I was kind of scared this match because he's taller than me, but he couldn't really capitalize on that. So I would just duck down, throw a jab, duck down, throw a jab, rinse and repeat. But I mean, still pretty entertaining. Then we have me versus Emiliano. I'm gonna put it in C tier. Round one was good, and Emiliano hit me with a nice overhand right. It was, the first round was good. Second round, though, or second and third round, I should say, it was Emiliano running away for 4 minutes, and I was chasing him, basically. I would put it in D tier, but that first round was actually pretty good, so I'll put it in C tier. Then we have Devin versus Victor. I believe this was only body shots. It was 1 round. It was basically just Devin dominating Victor for a minute. Victor threw back a little bit, actually, but it was basically just Victor didn't want to get punched in the face, so Devin just kind of went out there and just Victor threw a couple, but Devin won. I'll put it in C tier. Then we have me versus Devin. This was actually a draw. So this one was kind of weird because you can tell that Devin kind of was treating it like a sparring match. So was I. We both didn't really want to hit each other hard. So Devin had this nice little style where he would weave back and forth and throw a right, then a left, a right, then a left. And I couldn't really do anything about it. But the thing with that style is that when you box like that, your head is always open. So he would be hitting me with a right and a left, and I'd be jabbing straight down the middle. And it would basically just be like that the whole time. Devin was really bad at covering his face. So it was just kind of a heyday for me. I was just hitting jabs, uppercuts, but I also wasn't putting any velocity on them either because I can tell that he was kind of going easy on me. So I was going easy on him in return. So there was no hard punches, but we landed like 60 or 70 punches each just because it was just all those light punches, but both of us weren't really covering. So I'm going to put it in B tier because it was a pretty fun match. Um, no like knockout punches or anything, but a lot of punches were landed and it was pretty entertaining to watch. Then we have Devin versus Greg, definitely an A tier match. I'll actually put it in S tier. This was a very great match to watch because it was just 2 rounds or I think a round and a half, because Devin and Greg basically just said, all right, we're going to go out and just swing at each other. So, right when the bell started, and it was also a really good match because Greg's left handed and Devin's right handed. So, they were just landing hooks. Devin would land a hook and they'd land hooks at the same exact time, since obviously both two right hand fighters, you're probably gonna, put your hand up and one of them's gonna block a punch. But when it's a right and a left hand, both can land at the same time. So they were basically just throwing hooks at the same time and hitting each other. And it was just a battle of who can punch harder. And obviously, Greg outweighs Devin by like 30 pounds. So Devin was a little bit better technically, but Greg just hit this really good left hook that just rocked Devin, and I think that was just, yeah, they basically just gave it up. They could have kept going, but it was smart to just leave it at that because you didn't want to end up like me in this video, or Oliver, because Oliver was puking and I was bleeding everywhere. So it was a smart thing to call it off there. Then we have me versus Victor. I'll put it in B tier. Kind of funny. It was just basically, there was this one sequence where I was just faint jabbing because it was a body shot only. So I was just kind of standing there. I also had a little bit of anger or pettiness, I don't know what you want to call it, but because Victor would always want to do body shots with, okay, pause. But Victor would always want to, box me when we were younger. Or he was a freshman, I was a sophomore, and he was always like, "Come on, let's do body shots. Come on, let's go." So then we would go up. I think I have it on camera too. It's just not very good, but he was more into boxing than I was, so I wasn't a great boxer, and I didn't really want to punch him that hard, and he was just going off on me. So I wanted my revenge in this. So I was just feint jabbing with my right hand, and he was just kind of standing there. He didn't know what I was doing. I just threw this vicious left hook right to his solar plex. So that was a pretty funny one. That's why it's in B tier. Me versus Greg, I'll put it in A tier. Some funny moments. Greg was really just throwing an overhand left that I saw coming from a mile away every time. So I was just able to back up, throw a jab. Greg also wasn't very good at covering his head or any head movement. So it was just kind of like a still target. I was just able to hit a jab, then an uppercut. I wasn't trying to take his head off or anything, but my punches were still somewhat hard. So, I would throw a jab, and that's what I was gonna say. That was a funny moment in the video. I threw a jab, and then Greg was like, "Oh, that's good," and then I said, "Oh yeah, that was just a jab," and then I threw an uppercut, and then everyone was laughing, like, "Oh, yeah, he's shitting on him now," because yeah, but it was pretty fun. It was I think 3 rounds, kind of a dominant performance, but Greg had his moments. Obviously, we both weren't great boxers. I knew a little bit more, but if we ever have a rematch, I'd be interested because Greg and Archer have that short, stocky body type that could work well. They can kind of, I would, if I had any advice for them, I would just say that they should turn into like an Oliver type fighter. Although the reason why I had trouble against Oliver is he's my height, he's pretty tall. So from a tall fighter, you really don't expect overhand rights. With Greg and Archer, they're short, so I just saw that coming from a mile away every time, and it was easy for me to dodge it. But when a tall fighter is doing it, it's hard because their arms are longer too. So I can't lean back. I can't really. The only chance I have is if I duck down or put my hands up, and obviously I wasn't prepared for that. So that's why I got my ass kicked. Then we have me versus my dad. I'll put it in B tier. It was kind of. It was a pretty entertaining match. Um, I was just it was no, it was face shots too. Uh, I was just trying to take his head off. There's not a lot of matches here where I'm actually trying, like throwing full hard punches. More recently, I've been like that. The first couple matches, I was really too nice. This fight, I was not nice though. I was just really, and he also wasn't trying to hit me too hard. You can tell that he's pretty naturally gifted. I mean, apparently he used to be a street fighter though, so that makes sense why he can punch pretty well. So he got me a couple times in this video. This is one of the only times that it wasn't a boxing match outside, and it was actually in a room with walls. So that's also why I got screwed. Kinda, I would just throw some really hard punches, and then I'd get a little bit tired, and then he'd come back, he'd get me against the wall, and then he would just start throwing punches, and my head would ricochet against the wall. So that was pretty funny. but obviously you can tell that he wasn't trying to really hurt me or anything, which makes sense. But also, he had a lot of health issues as well, so it was kind of mean of me that I was trying, especially since he has diabetes, so his stomach is pretty sensitive, and I was really just trying to hit him in the stomach as hard as I could. So, yeah, that wasn't very nice of me, but anyway. Then we have we have Logan versus Emiliano 2. If you're wondering why the first match isn't on here, is because it was a wrestling match. It was called a fight, but there was no punches, so it was basically just a wrestling match. Um, so this was also a really hyped up match, at least in my opinion. Um, it didn't really land as much. I glazed Logan too hard sometimes. I mean, Logan went out there and he surprisingly he outweighs Emiliano by like 50 pounds, but Emiliano was the one who got gassed in the first round. Logan was going for it. He was walking him down. Uh, Logan can't really throw with his right, so it was more like he was just throwing a right out there, then coming with an overhand left, a couple left jabs because he's left-handed too. So, and then Emiliano, it wasn't a fair fight. That's also why it has to be in B tier, because Emiliano couldn't punch Logan in the head and Logan could punch him in the head. So it was an unfair match from the start. I just really wanted to see the rematch, kinda, even though they never boxed beforehand. It was just wrestling. But yeah, I wanted to see it, so that's why it happened. And a pretty good performance from Logan, um, and not a very good performance by Emiliano. But if I see, how do I say this? If Emiliano makes a return, I would want to see him have better cardio, because he's had two matches and both he's gassed out in the first round, which is surprising because he weighs 130 pounds. Then we have me versus Archer, the first match, which was only body shots, which doesn't favor me, obviously. I'm going to put it in A tier, though. Um, we really just let it all out there. I didn't want to do body shots in the first place, because when you're throwing bodies with a short fighter and you're a tall fighter, obviously they have the advantage because they're staring at your chest, so they can just throw body punches all day. And then if I was going to throw body punches on him, I actually have to lean over to hit him in the stomach. So that's why it was a very hard match for me. But I threw a lot of punches. I think I landed 80 or 90 body punches just because I was really just throwing punches the whole time. I was leaning over and just throwing punches. Then he was just going for power punches. I was just going for that was basically why it was a draw, because he landed like 60 or 70 hard punches. One that got me right in the solar plex. That was the controversy. Did I go down after the bell or before the bell? I still say it was after the bell, because Victor said time and then I took a knee. But that's why there was some controversy in this match. But he hit me with a really nice shot. So he was just going for power. I was going for speed, basically. So that's why it's a draw, because I outlanded him, but he had the power punches. So, and also it wasn't really a fair match in the first place because it was a body shot match. So, yeah, that's why we had to have the rematch. Then we have me versus Brandon. I'm going to say it's another A tier fight. Uh, Actually, I'm gonna have to put it down in B tier, only because the first round was really good. I was actually throwing with some velocity. It was Obviously, it was my first real boxing match, and I was like, "Hey, this is easy," because I was just hitting him with jabs repeatedly in the first round. I think I even made his nose bleed, which was surprising. I was like, "Hey, I'm actually pretty good at this." I was actually throwing full strength here. So I did feel kind of bad, but he was also talking trash. He was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna kick your ass. I box in my gym." I'm like, "Okay, I have to try here then," and I did. But then he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna cut my lips on my braces, so we can't. Don't hit me in the face." So, and then the second and third round were just kind of weird. But there you have it. These are my rankings on my fights. So basically, if you're going to watch any matches, it's going to be Mark versus Gary and Devin versus Greg, which both have about 100 views. Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody really cares, but Devin versus Greg has 101, and then Gary versus Mark 109. Which my most popular ones are Julius versus Luke, but that's mostly just because people are mad because I let Luke get beat up for 3 rounds. And then also me versus Cole, me versus Richard. But I mean, those fights are good, but I think if you just want entertaining, just full brawls, just Mark versus Gary, Devin versus Greg, and me versus Luke. So there you have it.